That is where men like you belong. Coleman on the floor. The words cut through Harborview Diner just as Darnell Coleman hit the edge of table 7 and one paper cup of hot coffee tipped over, spilling across the worn wooden floor like a dark stain spreading through the room. His daughter Sophie froze beside her little backpack, one purple crayon rolling from her hand and stopping near the polished heel of Audrey Blake, the woman everyone in the room suddenly recognized, but no one dared greet too loudly. Audrey Blake, Chief Executive Officer of Blake Hospitality Group, had just stepped into the diner with 2 assistants, a security officer, and a contract cold enough to change the future of the entire block. She had come to measure walls, counters, profit margins, and weaknesses. She had not come to watch a grown man get humiliated in front of his child. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and second chances, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we are glad you are here. Now back to Darnell Coleman. The man who pushed him was Travis Boone, Regional Development Manager, expensive watch, perfect haircut, smile, sharp enough to make kindness feel foolish. He stood over Darnell with one hand still raised not in defense, but in performance, as though the diner were a stage and everyone else had paid to watch him win. "Get up," Travis said, "or stay down. Either way, people like you are the reason places like this fail." A few customers shifted in their seats. Someone near the window lifted a phone, then lowered it again. Behind the counter, Megan Porter pressed both hands against her apron, her face pale with the kind of fear workers learn to hide when rent is due on Friday. Dorothy Keller, the diner's owner, looked like she wanted to speak, but years of bills, repairs, and threats had taught her that some men enjoyed crushing voices more than answering them. Darnell did not rush to his feet. He did not swing. He did not shout. He turned first toward Sophie because that was who he was before he was anything else. A father, a tired father, maybe a poor father certainly, but not a broken one. The deep brown of his hands showed every callous, every hour of honest work, every sacrifice made quietly, so his daughter would not have to know the weight of them. Coffee dripped from the sleeve of his faded denim jacket. The room smelled of cinnamon rolls, rainwater, and burnt espresso from the old machine coughing behind the counter. Outside, October, rain tapped against the glass in soft, nervous rhythms. Inside, Travis laughed once loud enough to invite others to join him. Nobody did. Darnell reached down, picked up Sophie's purple crayon, wiped it carefully with his thumb, and placed it back in her small hand. "Look at me, sweetheart," he said, his voice low and steady. Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but she looked. "A man can fall without becoming low." The sentence did not sound like a comeback. It sounded like a prayer spoken by someone who had survived worse rooms than this one. And here is something worth sitting with, that kind of dignity, the kind that holds itself together, not for applause, but for a child watching, is not something any title or paycheck can manufacture. It is built in silence over years in rooms where nobody was keeping score. Audrey Blake, who had built a career on reading people in less than 30 seconds, felt something in the diner change. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. Travis took a step closer, irritated by the silence he had not ordered. "You think that sounds noble?" he snapped. Darnell rose slowly, one palm on the table, the other still open where Sophie could see it. No fists, no threat, just quiet control. The old espresso machine hissed behind him like it was holding its breath. Audrey's security officer, Owen Pierce, moved half an inch forward, then stopped. He had seen fear before. He had seen anger, but the look in Darnell Coleman's eyes was neither. It was discipline. It was restraint. It was dignity standing up in a wet jacket while a whole diner suddenly forgot how to breathe. For several seconds, nobody moved. And in that silence, Harborview Diner revealed what it had always been. Not a business waiting to be measured by a corporate clipboard, but a small shelter with scratched tables, mismatched chairs, and names remembered better than orders. Darnell Coleman stood near table 7 with coffee drying on his sleeve. but every person in that room had seen him there before in quieter moments, long before Audrey Blake arrived with her polished coat and unreadable eyes. They had seen him at 6:15 in the morning, kneeling behind the counter with a flashlight between his teeth, trying to coax life out of the espresso machine Dorothy Keller could not afford to replace. They had seen him carry flour from the delivery truck when the driver left it by the curb in the rain. They had seen him fix the loose front door that used to swing open whenever the wind came hard off the bay. He never made a speech about it. He never handed anyone a bill unless Dorothy insisted. He simply showed up sleeves rolled. Hospitality group sat behind the register in a white envelope offering a buyout that sounded generous only if you did not understand what it meant to lose the last place in town where lonely people were still greeted by name. At the corner table, Sophie had been coloring her school assignment a drawing titled, "My Safe Place," pressing her crayons so carefully that the paper wrinkled beneath her small hand. She had drawn the diner windows glowing yellow, Dorothy behind the counter, Megan balancing a tray, and Darnell standing by the door like he was making sure the whole world behaved before it came inside. Megan Porter had noticed and laughed softly. "Your dad looks like a security guard." Sophie did not look up. "He is not a guard. He is just safe." Darnell had heard that from under the counter, and for one breath, his wrench stopped moving. The rain had begun after lunch, soft at first, then harder, bringing in customers who shook water from umbrellas and ordered soup, black coffee, and second chances disguised as ordinary meals. That was when Travis Boone arrived, not through the door like a customer, but through the room like a warning. He inspected the cracked tile, the aging menu board, the tired faces, and finally Megan, whose hands trembled when he asked why the display case looked half empty. "Because we sold the morning batch," she said. "Then make it look full," Travis replied. "People do not invest in empty." Darnell looked up from the espresso machine. He said nothing yet, but the diner felt him notice. And sometimes with men like Darnell Coleman, being noticed was the first quiet form of protection. Travis Boone had not come alone. He had come 15 minutes ahead of Audrey Blake, which meant every insult he spoke carried the confidence of a man arranging the room before the person with power arrived. He walked past the counter, tapped one finger against the old pastry case, and smiled at Dorothy as though her whole life were an inconvenience on his schedule. "This is exactly what I told corporate," he said. "Sentimental, outdated, inefficient." Dorothy folded her hands in front of her apron. "This diner has served this neighborhood for 29 years. Travis glanced around at the chipped mugs, the raincoats hanging from chairbacks, the elderly man reading a newspaper by the window. "And that is why it looks 30 years tired." Megan lowered her eyes. Darnell rose from behind the espresso machine with a small screwdriver in one hand, grease along his dark knuckles, and the quiet expression of a man measuring whether a word would help or only feed the fire. Travis saw him and smirked. "Still playing repairman, Coleman? I thought Dorothy had standards." Darnell set the screwdriver on a folded towel. "The machine needed a new seal. The whole place needs a new owner." The front bell chimed before anyone could answer, and the diner seemed to inhale all at once. Audrey Blake stepped inside with rain shining on the shoulders of her cream-colored coat, her dark blonde hair pinned smooth, her face calm in the way expensive boardrooms teach people to be calm. Two assistants followed with tablets. Owen Pierce came last, broad-shouldered, watchful, holding the door just long enough for the wind to push in the smell of wet pavement and fallen leaves. Travis changed instantly. His back straightened. His voice warmed his cruelty, put on a suit. "Miss Blake," he said, crossing the room. "Welcome to Harborview. I apologize for the condition. As you can see, the property has potential, but the current operation is struggling." Audrey did not smile. She scanned the diner like a woman trained to find weakness and silence. Her eyes touched the water stain on the ceiling, the uneven floorboard near the counter, the tired register, then Darnell's worn jacket and work boots. To her, in that first narrow glance, he looked like part of the decay Travis had described in his reports. Another local problem, another emotional complication, another man with sad eyes standing between progress and profit. Sophie watched Audrey from the corner table, her purple crayon hovering above the page. Audrey noticed the child staring, and perhaps because children were harder to read than contracts, she stepped closer. "What are you drawing?" Sophie turned the paper slightly. It showed the diner in bright yellow, but Audrey herself stood near the door with a crown cracked down the middle. One assistant gave an awkward little cough. Audrey's eyebrows lifted. "Is that supposed to be me?" Sophie nodded. Darnell said gently, "Sophie." But Audrey raised one hand, not offended, only curious. "Why is the crown broken?" Sophie looked at the drawing, then at Audrey's perfect coat, perfect posture, perfect loneliness. Because pretty things can still look lonely. For the first time since she entered, Audrey Blake had no immediate answer. Sometimes it takes a child's unfiltered honesty to hand someone powerful a mirror they have been avoiding for years. If someone in your life has that kind of courage to tell you the truth, gently do not silence them. Listen, that kind of honesty is rare, and it is a gift. Audrey Blake looked at Sophie's drawing longer than anyone expected. And for a moment, the diner held a strange, fragile grace, as if one child's honest sentence had placed a hand on the shoulder of a woman who had forgotten she was allowed to be human. Then Travis Boone laughed. Not loudly at first, just enough to break the spell. "Kids say the funniest things," he said, stepping between Audrey and the table as if blocking sunlight from reaching a seed. "Her father lets her spend too much time around adult problems." Darnell's face did not change, but his eyes moved from Travis to Sophie, and Sophie quietly pulled her drawing closer to her chest. Audrey noticed that. She also noticed how Travis smiled at her but frightened everyone else. The old espresso machine gave a tired hiss behind the counter, and Megan Porter turned too quickly with a tray of fresh coffee cups. One saucer slipped, tapped the counter, and rolled to the floor without breaking. It was a small mistake, the kind that happens in every diner in America before the lunch rush is over. Travis made it sound like a crime. "Unbelievable," he snapped. Megan bent down at once. "I am sorry. I will get it." "Do not apologize to the floor," Travis said. "Apologize to Miss Blake. She is here to decide whether this place deserves saving, and you are showing her exactly why it does not." Megan stood slowly, her cheeks burning. The customers looked away in that painful way good people sometimes do when they are ashamed of their own fear. Dorothy opened her mouth. Travis pointed at her without even turning. "Do not. You have done enough by hiring people who panic over dishes." Megan swallowed hard and faced Audrey. "Miss Blake, I am sorry." Her voice trembled on the last word. Darnell stepped forward then. Not fast, not dramatic. Just one quiet step that placed him beside Megan instead of behind her. "She did not drop the saucer," he said. Travis turned, delighted to have the target he preferred. "Excuse me. The counter edge is uneven," Darnell said, tapping the warped wood lightly with 2 fingers. "I told you that yesterday when you leaned on it and cracked the brace." Travis's smile thinned. "Careful, Coleman." Darnell picked up the saucer, wiped it with a clean towel, and set it gently near the sink. Truth does not become disrespect just because it arrives from someone you look down on. The diner went very still. 3 short breaths passed. Megan looked at Darnell. Dorothy looked at the floor. Audrey looked at Travis. Outside, rain streamed down the windows like silver threads, and the yellow light above the counter flickered once, making the room feel older, smaller, more honest. Travis stepped close enough that his expensive cologne covered the smell of coffee. "You think this is your moment," he said. "No," Darnell answered. "I think it is hers." He nodded toward Megan. "Let her work." That was all. No insult, no challenge, no performance. But it struck Travis harder than shouting would have because Darnell had refused the one thing bullies need most. He refused to be afraid in public. Travis's jaw tightened. He looked toward Audrey, then the assistants, then the phones half raised around the room, and pride made the decision. Wisdom would not. "Men like you always want to play noble," he said, and with one sharp motion he shoved Darnell back into table 7. The coffee cup tipped. Sophie gasped. Megan covered her mouth. Audrey's assistant took one step backward. Darnell caught the table edge with his palm, steadying himself before anything could fall onto his daughter. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the scrape of chair legs, the drip of coffee, and Sophie's purple crayon rolling across the floor. Then Darnell looked at the crayon, picked it up first, and placed it back in his daughter's hand, because even in humiliation, he knew what mattered most. The purple crayon rested back in Sophie's hand, but her fingers would not close around it. She stared at Darnell as if the whole world had tilted, and only his voice could make it level again. Travis Boone stood a few feet away, breathing through his nose, waiting for the anger that never came. That was what unsettled him most. He had shoved men before with words, with pressure, with titles, with the invisible weight of someone who believed the room belonged to him. Most people either shrank or snapped. Darnell Coleman didn't either. He rose slowly, coffee staining one sleeve, his face, calm his eyes, clear his palms open where Sophie could see them. "It is all right," he said softly. "No one is hurt." Travis scoffed. "That is right. No one is hurt. So maybe stop acting like a saint." Darnell did not look at him yet. He looked at Megan, who was frozen near the counter. "Are you okay?" Megan nodded, but her chin trembled. He looked at Dorothy. "Did the hot coffee reach your shoes?" Dorothy shook her head. Then he looked at Sophie. "Breathe with me, sweetheart. In through the nose, out slow." Audrey Blake watched the sequence with an expression she could not hide anymore. Darnell had checked on everyone in the room before himself, not because cameras were raised, not because she was there, because that was the order of his soul. What Travis saw as weakness was in fact the hardest thing a person can do, absorb cruelty without becoming it. That is not passivity. That is the deepest form of strength most people spend a lifetime trying to find. Travis noticed Audrey watching Darnell, and jealousy flashed across his face like a match struck in a dark room. "Enough," he said, stepping forward. "You do not get to turn this into some little hero moment." Owen Pierce shifted from beside the door, ready now, his shoulders tightening beneath his dark jacket. But before Owen could cross the floor, Travis reached toward Darnell again, not with the force of a fight, but with the careless arrogance of a man used to moving people out of his way. Darnell moved only half a step. His hand met Travis's wrist, light as a warning, precise as a lock clicking into place. There was no struggle, no impact, no sound except the rain on the windows and the low hum of the espresso machine. Travis stopped because his own momentum had nowhere left to go. Darnell did not twist. He did not punish. He simply guided Travis's hand down and away the way someone might close a door before a child saw what stood behind it. "Please do not do that again," Darnell said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the diner. Travis blinked, confused by the absence of pain, the absence of drama, the terrible embarrassment of being controlled without being attacked. Darnell released him immediately and stepped back, palms open again. Owen Pierce did not move now. His eyes had changed. He had seen men trained to intimidate, men trained to win, men trained to hurt. This was different. This was restraint built from discipline, the kind of control that usually came from years of learning how not to use power unless there was no other choice. Audrey leaned slightly toward Owen without taking her eyes off Darnell. "Who is he?" she asked under her breath. Owen answered just as softly, "Not the man they told you he was." The diner held that sentence like a secret. A phone lowered near the window. A spoon stopped against a mug. Even Travis seemed smaller. Not because Darnell had made him small, but because truth had removed the costume from his pride. Sophie finally closed her fingers around the crayon. Darnell gave her the faintest smile, the kind a father gives when he is trying to say everything is safe before he is sure it is. And for the first time that afternoon, Audrey Blake looked at Harborview Diner and saw not a failing property, but a room full of people waiting for someone with power to remember what respect looked like. There is a quiet tragedy in how often we let the loudest voice in the room shape our first impression of a place or a person. The real story is almost always held by the ones who never raise their voice at all. Next time you walk into a room, look for the person doing the most without saying the most. That person usually knows what the room truly needs. Audrey Blake did not speak at first, and that silence was heavier than any question. She looked at Darnell Coleman, then at Travis Boone, then at the faces around the diner, faces that seemed to be asking her what kind of power she had brought through their door. Travis tried to laugh it off, but the laugh came out thin. "That was a neat little trick," he said. "Maybe he practices on people who cannot afford lawyers." Darnell's eyes flicked towards Sophie, and the warning in them was not anger. It was a boundary. "Do not bring my daughter into this. Then maybe do not raise her in a failing diner," Travis snapped. Sophie flinched, and that small movement did what no argument had done. It pulled something brave from inside her. She slid off her chair, clutching her drawing notebook to her chest, and walked toward Audrey with steps so careful the room seemed to count them. Darnell turned. "Sophie, sweetheart, you do not have to." But she kept walking. Her sneakers squeaked softly on the wet floor where coffee had spilled. She stopped in front of Audrey and held up the notebook with both hands. "My daddy is not what he says." Audrey lowered herself slightly. Not enough to look childish, just enough to meet Sophie without making her feel small. "What do you want me to see?" Sophie opened to the first page. There was an old woman beside a blue sedan, and Darnell crouched by a tire in the rain, his dark hands sure and steady against the wheel. "Mrs. Elaine from Maple Street," Sophie said. "Her tire went flat after church. Daddy fixed it and would not take money because she only had grocery cash." She turned the page. A boy sat alone outside the diner with a brown lunch bag. "That is Caleb. He used to wait at the bus stop hungry. Daddy told Dorothy to put extra soup in a cup and said it was accidentally made." Dorothy covered her mouth and her eyes shone. Sophie turned another page. Megan stood under an umbrella crying beside the back door. Darnell was drawn beside her with a toolbox. Miss Megan's car would not start when her little brother had a fever. Daddy fixed the battery after work. He said family emergencies should not come with invoices. Megan looked down, tears slipping before she could hide them. The rain softened against the windows. The espresso machine gave one low breath behind the counter. The diner was no longer watching a scene. It was remembering a man. Sophie turned one final page, slower than the others. It showed Darnell sitting at the kitchen table late at night, bills stacked beside him, his head bowed, one hand resting near a photograph of a woman with kind eyes. "That is my mom," Sophie whispered. "She is in heaven now. Daddy says grief is not an excuse to stop being good." Audrey's face changed, not with pity, but with recognition, as if a locked room inside her had heard the right key. Travis rolled his eyes, desperate to regain the shape of the room. "Very touching," he said, "but children draw fairy tales." Sophie looked at him, her voice trembling but clear. "Daddy says kindness is what you do when nobody can pay you back." No one breathed for a moment. Darnell closed his eyes briefly, not embarrassed, not proud, simply humbled by the courage of his own child. Audrey stood slowly holding Sophie's words, like evidence more powerful than any report. She turned toward Darnell, and this time when she looked at his worn jacket and tired hands, she did not see failure. She saw a quiet dignity that had been serving this room long before she ever walked into it. Audrey turned toward Travis Boone, and the warmth that Sophie had awakened in her eyes did not make her softer toward cruelty. It made her clearer. "Mr. Boone," she said, "is there anything in your report you would like to correct before I review it again?" Travis straightened, too quickly. "My report is accurate. Emotional speeches do not change financial reality." Darnell gently placed a hand on Sophie's shoulder and guided her back beside him. "No," he said quietly. "But evidence does." Travis's head turned. "Evidence of what?" Darnell looked toward the espresso machine behind the counter, the old chrome body still hissing in tired little breaths. That machine did not fail on its own. Dorothy frowned. "Darnell." He walked behind the counter and lifted the side panel he had been working on that morning. The screws were already loose, arranged neatly on a folded napkin because Darnell did even small things with care. Inside, a black power line hung with a clean slice across its insulation. Not worn, not frayed, cut. The room leaned toward the truth before anyone said its name. Megan whispered, "That is why it kept shorting out." Travis scoffed. "Old equipment breaks. That is what old equipment does." Darnell did not answer him. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small memory card sealed in a clear plastic sleeve. "The wiring looked wrong when I opened it at 6:30 this morning," he said. "So I checked the service camera Dorothy forgot she had installed above the bakery shelf last winter." Dorothy blinked through tears. "The one my nephew set up." Darnell nodded. "It was not connected to the internet anymore, but it was still recording locally." Travis's face lost a shade of color, but he recovered with a practiced smile. "This is ridiculous. He is a handyman pretending to be an investigator." Owen Pierce stepped forward at last, his voice calm and official without needing a badge. "Then you should not mind if we watch it." Audrey held out her hand. "Play it." One of her assistants connected the memory card to a tablet and mirrored it to the small screen above the counter, the one usually used for daily specials and community announcements. For a moment, there was only grainy gray footage of the empty diner before sunrise. Then Travis appeared, not polished, not charming, not smiling for corporate. He moved behind the counter, looked over his shoulder, and opened the espresso machine panel with a key Dorothy had never given him. Megan covered her mouth. Dorothy whispered, "Lord have mercy." On the screen, Travis clipped the wire, closed the panel, and pulled out his phone. His voice came through thin but clear. "By tonight, Blake will see a failing diner full of desperate people. We scare them low enough, they sell low enough." Audrey did not move. The footage continued. Travis laughed into the call. "Do not worry. I will clean out the whole block. Audrey wants numbers, not sob stories." The words landed harder than thunder because they had used her name as a weapon. Travis stepped backward as if distance could erase what everyone had heard. "That is taken out of context." Darnell looked at him still without hatred. "The whole thing is context." No one laughed. No one shifted. Even the rain seemed quieter. Audrey's assistant stopped typing. Owen's jaw tightened. A customer near the window slowly lowered his coffee cup without drinking. This was the second silence of the afternoon, but it was not the silence of shock anymore. It was the silence that comes when truth walks into a room and every lie suddenly has nowhere to stand. Audrey Blake stared at the frozen image on the screen at Travis Boone, standing inside Harborview Diner before dawn, with wire cutters in his hand and her name in his mouth. And for the first time that afternoon, the power in the room stopped belonging to the loudest person. It belonged to the truth. Travis lifted both hands with a nervous little laugh. "Audrey, come on. You know how these projects work. People resist change. Sometimes you have to create urgency." Audrey turned to him slowly. "Do not call this urgency." Her voice was calm, but every word seemed to remove another brick from the wall he had built around himself. This was sabotage. Travis swallowed. "I was protecting the investment." "No," Audrey said. "You were protecting your ego." The diner remained still. Megan stood behind the counter with one hand over her heart. Dorothy Keller gripped the register as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. Sophie leaned against Darnell's side, her notebook pressed to her chest, watching Audrey the way children watch adults when they are trying to decide whether the world is still fair. Owen Pierce stepped closer to Travis, not touching him. not threatening him, simply standing where consequence needed a witness. Audrey looked at her assistant. "Call legal. Preserve the footage. Then call the police and report property damage, coercion, and harassment." Travis's face tightened. "You are making a mistake." Audrey did not blink. "I made the mistake when I let your report speak louder than the people in this room." That sentence traveled through the diner like a bell rung softly in a church. Not dramatic, not polished, honest. Travis looked around, searching for one friendly face, one person willing to pretend with him. He found none. The businessman near the window looked down at his cup. The elderly man with the newspaper folded it neatly and set it aside. Megan finally stood a little straighter. Dorothy wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. Darnell did not smile. He did not celebrate. He only rested one steady hand on Sophie's shoulder, reminding her without words that justice did not need cruelty to be complete. Audrey stepped toward him then, and the expensive confidence she had worn into the diner was gone. What remained was quieter, and because it was quieter, it felt real. "Mr. Coleman," she said. Darnell looked surprised by the formality. "Ma'am?" Audrey glanced at Sophie's drawing notebook, then at the coffee stain on Darnell's sleeve, then at the floor where the purple crayon had rolled only minutes before. "I came here to measure property," she said. "I forgot to measure people." No one moved. Even Travis stopped breathing loudly. The rain tapped the windows in gentle, uneven beats, and the old espresso machine gave a tired hiss, like the diner itself was listening. Audrey turned to Dorothy. "Mrs. Keller Blake Hospitality Group will not be buying this diner to replace it." Dorothy's lips parted, but no sound came out. Audrey continued. "If you allow it, we will cover the repairs, Travis cost, update the wiring, restore the kitchen, and help refinance the building in your name. The sign stays, the staff stays, your ownership stays." Megan began to cry silently. Sophie looked up at Darnell, confused by hope arriving so suddenly. "Daddy," she whispered, "does that mean Harborview gets to live?" Darnell's throat moved before he answered. "I think it does, sweetheart." Audrey looked at Megan next. "And you will not apologize for a saucer again when a man breaks the table beneath it." Megan nodded, tears shining, dignity returning to her face one breath at a time. Travis stepped back as Owen guided him toward the door to wait outside for the officers. No one clapped. That was what made it sacred. This was the third silence. Not the silence of fear and not the silence of exposure. It was the silence of a room learning how heavy an apology can be when it is finally spoken by someone powerful enough to make it matter. Accountability without cruelty is one of the rarest things a person in power can offer. When someone who has wronged you finally acknowledges it, resist the urge to make them small. Let the truth be enough. That kind of grace does not make you weak. It makes the room safer for everyone still standing in it. 1 month later, Harborview Diner opened before sunrise, the way it always had, but the light inside seemed warmer, as if the walls themselves had been waiting years to breathe again. The cracked tile near the counter had been replaced. The wiring was safe. The kitchen had new steel shelves, a repaired oven, and an espresso machine that no longer coughed like an old man in winter. But the sign outside remained the same. Faded blue letters swinging gently above the door because Audrey Blake had kept her promise. She did not rename the diner. She did not cover it in polished branding. She did not turn Dorothy Keller's life into a corporate story about growth. She simply helped restore what cruelty had tried to erase. Dorothy still owned it. Megan Porter now managed the morning shift, standing taller each day, her voice steady when vendors called and her smile returning little by little like sunlight finding its way through clouds. Owen Pierce stopped by most mornings for black coffee, always leaving exact change and a quiet nod for Darnell Coleman, the kind of nod men give when respect does not need many words. As for Audrey, she came every Friday at 7:30, not with assistants, not with contracts, not with that cold armor of hurry, but alone. She sat at the corner table near the window, drank coffee from a chipped white mug, and listened when people spoke. That was new for her. Maybe redemption begins that way, not with a grand speech, but with a powerful person choosing to hear the voices she once walked past. Darnell had accepted one offer from her, but only after rewriting half of it by hand at Dorothy's counter. He would advise Blake Hospitality Group on safety, ethical redevelopment, and community protection. But Harborview would never be used as a symbol unless the people inside it agreed. Audrey had read his conditions twice, then smiled faintly. "You negotiate like a man who has nothing to lose." Darnell shook his head and looked toward Sophie, who was helping Megan arrange muffins behind the counter. "No, ma'am. I negotiate like a man who knows exactly what he has to protect." Audrey did not answer right away. She only looked at Sophie, at Dorothy, at the diner, filling slowly with neighbors, workers, teachers, widowers, and tired parents counting dollars before ordering breakfast. Then she said, "I think I am starting to understand." On the wall beside the register, Sophie's new drawing hung in a simple wooden frame. In it, Darnell was not on the floor. Travis was not in the center. Audrey no longer wore a cracked crown. Dorothy stood behind the counter. Megan held a tray. Owen waited by the door, and Darnell stood in the rain outside the diner with one hand open, not pushing anyone away, just keeping the light safe for everyone inside. Under the drawing, Sophie had written in purple crayon. The whole diner went silent because truth finally had a voice. Darnell read it every morning before work, and every morning it humbled him, not because the world had finally seen him, but because his daughter had. And sometimes that is the miracle a good father prays for most. Not applause, not money, not revenge, but the quiet hope that his child will remember. He chose dignity when anger would have been easier. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments what moment stayed with you most. Darnell's restraint, Sophie's courage, Dorothy's second chance, or Audrey's apology. And if you believe kindness still matters in a world that often rewards pride, share this story with someone who needs to remember that quiet dignity can change a whole room. Thank you for watching until the end.